Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. We are at the end of chapter 21, and we have discussed at length the punishment of the descendants of Shaul HaMelech, and 7 of them were given over to the Givonites who had a claim against Shaul. And this ultimately brought about a Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, because this is something that the king did wrong. And we see how the Jewish people don't look at the fact that this is a king and connections and higher status. They consider if he did something wrong, he gets punished in a very severe way. And this ultimately brought about 150,000 converts to the Jewish people. That's what it says in the Talmud, that they were so impressed that Shaul's family was punished for treating the Givonites in a bad way, even though the Givonites were not the most righteous people. They lied to us and so on. But nevertheless, there was something that Shaul did wrong. And if that's the way it is for treating the Givonites bad, how much more so imagine treating a regular Jew. So ultimately, it did create a big Kiddush Hashem, a sanctifying God's name, a sanctification of God's name. And we mentioned how the Givonites were very cruel in their method of and their choice of how to punish the descendants of Shaul. They did not give in. They were not willing to mediate and work anything out. They were very stubborn. They wanted death. They wanted hanging, and that's what they got. And they hanged the 7 of the descendants of Shaul. Now, 2 of them were children of Ritzpah. Ritzpah was a concubine of Shaul, and 2 of her children were hanged together with 5 others. Now, Ritzpah, it says she hung out during these 7 months that the bodies were hanging. She hung out there to shoo away the birds of prey and the animals, that the bodies shouldn't be desecrated. And of course, that's a very righteous thing. She hardly slept, hanging out there, constantly running and shooing away the birds and the animals. She says she took a sackcloth and spread it for herself over a rock, which basically meant she hung out there and she had this little sackcloth that she spread over her so that she could sit under it. And now I want to bring up this little verse, even though it's going back a little. I just want to bring one point, and that is the Radak's explanation here, and that the Radak brings a medrash that when it says El Hatzur to the rock, that she spread it out over a rock, what it means is, the medrash says, of course, it has the literal translation. She spread out this sackcloth and she made it herself, able to, I guess, a small mini level of comfort, some minute way, some slight way she was able to make herself a little more comfortable. Of course, I'm not sure how comfortable it could have been, but she brought that. Of course, that's the simple pshat. But in the Medrash says, and this is brought in the Radak, that when it says El Hatzur to the rock is used in many verses. And the verses mention that the rock is referring to the prayer called Siduk Hadin. Siduk Hadin is done at the end of a funeral. The relatives are supposed to, the children are supposed to say, we acknowledge whatever God does is correct. It's only recited on funerals that you say tachna that. In other words, if it's a holiday, you don't say this. But on a funeral that there's tachna that it's not a holiday, then you would say this prayer called Siduk Hadin. And one of the verses in that Siduk Hadin is Hatzur Tamim Pala. It's a verse in Ha'azinu. It says the rock is perfect in his ways, his actions. Hatzur Tamim Pala Kichol Drachav Mishpat. All his ways are justice, are just. Kel Emunah is a God of faith. Ve'ein Avel, there's no crookedness. Tzaddik v'yasher, who he is righteous and upright. And so that verse, together with many other verses, are recited. And the Medrash says this is what it says, that Ritzpah, even though she lost two of her children to the Givonites' cruel demand, nevertheless, she accepted God's verdict. She accepted what God wanted. God wanted us to appease the Givonites and give them what they want. And she accepted it, and that's why it says Vatateula El Hatzur, that she turned to or she spread out to saying the Tziduk Hadin, the Tzur, Hatzur Tamim Pa'olo, that verse about Tzur. So Hatzur, according to this, means the verse that talks about Tzur, talks about Hashem, who's the Tzur, who's the rock, and how righteous he is. So this point brings out how righteous Ritzpah really was. She was able to reach such a level of acknowledging God's righteousness, even with such tragic circumstances. And so that gives us another point about Ritzpah and about her righteousness. And of course, we mentioned about her righteousness of hanging out there caused David to want to rebury Shaul and Yonasan. Of course, we spoke about that. And then at the end of this chapter, where what we started learning was the 4 wars. And one of these wars, I've mentioned already that not necessarily were all these wars at this time in chronological order, but anyway, the first war that it talks about in verse 15 is the Plishtim again made a war with Israel. David and his servants went down and fought with the Plishtim, and David became faint. And then someone by the name of Ishbi Benoiv, who was one of the children of the giant, and the weight of his spear was 300 copper weights, and was girded with a new sword, declared that he would strike down David. And Avishai, the son of Tzruiah, came to his aid and struck the Plishtim, killing him. He struck the Plishti, I should say, and he killed him. And then David's men swore to him, saying, "You shall not go out to war with us anymore, so that you not extinguish the lamp of Israel." So here we have a war with this individual Ishbi Benoiv. He was one of the children of the giant, and we said it says Yelidei Harafa in the Hebrew. And we, of course, the simple translation, of course, could be giant, but there is another understanding of that. There is a term in the Chumash, actually, Rifa'im refers to the giant, so Harafa could mean giant. But there's a Talmudic statement that I mentioned, and from Saita, Gemara Talmud and Saita mentions that this is Arpa, had another name, Harafa. Arpa, very similar. Harafa and Arpa, just changing the hey with that ayin. And the Talmud over there mentions two opinions. Either her main name was Harafa, and her nickname was Arpa. In other words, they added the name Arpa, or the opposite. Her main name was Arpa, and the nickname was Harafa. And according to that, it tries to explain why they gave these nicknames. Either Arpa meant that she was sodomized, and Harafa would mean they gave her nickname Harafa because she gave herself to prostitution. That people, Harafa could mean threshing, that she allowed people to thresh her, so to speak, to have relations with her. And what it would seem is that she gave birth to these giants, that she specifically maybe wanted to have relations with the giant, have children that would be giants and strong. And I guess that was something maybe that they considered, power, something maybe that the Goyim were impressed with. So in any event, so these giants were her children. Again, the simple reading would just mean they were children of a giant, which could even mean the man was the giant. Harafa, Yelidei Harafa, the children of the giant, could refer to the man was the giant. But according to the Medrash, or the Gemara, Yelidei Harafa means they were children of Arpa, and she, I guess, had relations with a giant, and the children were the children of Arpa, and they were giants. She had giant, and one of them's name was Yishbi B'naiv. Now, and it mentions how his sword, his spear was this big, or the handle of the spear was this big, and it was a new one, so he wanted to show it off. That was customary, prove how daring he is, and so on. The main thing would be to prove by killing David. David had killed the brother of this individual. His name was Goliath, and that we learned about David killing Goliath, David and Goliath, a famous story. We learned about it in the beginning of David's fame, when he started out with, he came to Shaul and he said he's willing to fight with Goliath. And so that story, so here is the Ishbi B'naiv is wants to kill him, wants to kill David, and this is where the story is, and Avishai killed this Plishti. But really, there's a lot here that's not mentioned. And the Gemara adds a lot of detail to this story. And the detail that the Gemara adds, I'm going to share the screen, and we can actually see the, oh, it's not working, 1 second. We'll actually see the Gemara. We could do the Gemara inside. Try now, share screen. How come it's not? Okay, this should work. Share screen. Here it is. Okay. So the story is, who is Yishbi B'naiv? It's an interesting name, Yishbi B'naiv. So the way it's explained in the Gemara is, it brings this verse, and then it explains it with Rabbi Yehuda, and the name of Rav says that Ishbi B'naiv is telling us something. It sounds like Ishbi B'naiv is not his real name. It's giving him this nickname because it's telling us something. So what does Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav say? I'm going to start over that share screen. So the verse is brought, this verse that we just learned here in chapter 21, it says, Yishbi Benoiv was the children of Harafa, which we explained means Arpa. Who was Arpa? Arpa was the daughter-in-law of Naomi. In the story of Rus, Rus is the daughter-in-law that decided to join the Jewish people. Arpa is the daughter-in-law who left the Jewish people, and she chose to go back to her homeland, and she was the daughter of a king, King Eglon, king of Moab, and Rus, who was her sister and her sister-in-law. They two sisters married two brothers, so they were sisters and sister-in-laws. Rus chose to stay with Naomi and ended up having a grandchild or a great-grandchild, David, and Arpa left. Now Arpa had these giants and for children, and one of the giants was Goliath, and the other one is this Yishbi Benoiv. But the Gemara is going to translate Yishbi Benoiv, that Yishbi Benoiv is a word teaching us something. What sounds like Yishbi Benoiv was like a nickname. It was given to him, and at least in the Tanakh, but really maybe he might have had a different name. Yishbi Benoiv is telling us something about Noiv. Now let's remember what Noiv was. Noiv was a city of Koyanim. Shaul thought that city of Koyanim helped out David and was on David's side when Shaul was chasing after David. Shaul was paranoid that Noiv was really against him and on David's side, and there was reason to think so. And it was really a crazy time and a very tragic time, because Shaul was so angry that he had Doeg, one of his right-hand men, he had him kill out the entire city of Noiv. All the Koyanim were killed. A really sad story. And among them, that was the story of the Givonites also, that some of them either were killed or some of them were lost their sustenance and they died of starvation, or they just lost their sustenance, whatever it was. However, you learned that we've discussed it a little about the story of the Givonites, but that's the story of Noiv. Now, that story of Noiv, we look at it generally as a sin of Shaul. Shaul sinned. He messed up over there. That was a big mistake. He had to pay for it with his life. Doeg paid for it. He lost his Olam Haba. Shaul lost his some of his children in war. It was definitely a mistake what he did. It was a tragedy, real horrific tragedy. But what the Gemara in Sanhedrin, this is a tractate Sanhedrin on page 95, what it says there is something very surprising. That it says, not only was it their sin, but there's also a little guilt on the side of David. David's guilty for Noiv, that he had nothing. What was David? How could you blame David for killing out Noiv? David would never have allowed the killing of Noiv. And the answer is true. David would never have allowed the killing of Noiv. But David indirectly caused them to be a suspicious group. And because he indirectly caused Shaul to suspect Noiv, the city of Noiv, the Koyanim there, the Gadol, the Koyanim there, he suspected, because David caused that, he's actually held responsible, which really teaches us an important lesson. The lesson is that you don't even want to cause an indirectly someone to get killed. You don't want to be a cause. You don't want to cause a fight. You don't want to cause people to suspect someone of doing something wrong, even though you're just happen to it's going to come out of what you're doing. You don't intend to cause that. It's indirect and you don't even intend it, but you should be careful not to cause such a thing that would happen indirectly. Now, what we're going to see here is that David is actually judged by God, by the heavenly court, in a very severe way because of what he caused with Noiv. Now, obviously, the Shaul and Doeg, obviously what they did was horrific, but we have to understand that David is also considered, in the way God is judging him, is considered guilty in the indirect cause of this tragedy. Now, we also have to keep in mind that David is punished on his level. So if we were to be in that situation, obviously the punishment would not be as severe. But at the same time, it does teach us how careful we have to be not to cause indirect hatred and damage and punishment in an indirect way. Now, so the story here in the Gemara is that the Ishbi ben Noiv was one of the sons of the giant, and that's the verse. And the weight of his spear, we just read this verse, the weight of it was 300 shekels of copper, brass, and he was girded with new armor, planned to kill David. The Gemara says, what's the meaning of that name, Ishbi ben Noiv? So the Gemara answers, he came to punish David over the matter of Noiv. As I explained, David was indirectly the cause, based on the fact that he borrowed a sword from them. Maybe he shouldn't have done that. He was starving, he got food from them, and that maybe was allowed, maybe not. There are different opinions in the commentaries, but taking the sword definitely could have been, maybe that, that was a symbol of like, oh, they're on his side, they want him to go and fight Shaul, so it caused there to be this paranoia, which ultimately led to the death of the whole city of Noiv. Now, Hashem said to David, until when will this sin be concealed in your hand without getting punished? And through your actions, the city of priests were massacred. Through your actions, Doeg was banished from the world to come. Through your actions, Shaul and his 3 sons were killed. So Hashem told him, what would you like as your punishment? Would it be that should it affect you or your children? Would you like to take on the punishment? And that would mean that I will you will be handed to the enemy, or would you like it to just affect your children? And David said, I would like it to affect me. And so this is the continuation of that story. David went to hunt with a falcon, and Satan came and appeared to him as a deer. So he shot an arrow at the deer and didn't reach it. But the Satan caused David to follow the deer. And ultimately, it led David into the enemy territory, the land of the Plishtim. And Ishbi ben Noiv was right there. And Ishbi ben Noiv was one of the giants who was he was there. And he when he saw David, he said, this is the person who killed my brother, Goliath. And so Ishbi ben Noiv bound him up, doubled him over, placed him on the ground, and he threw him under the beam of an olive press to crush him. So in other words, he's going to crush him with the olive press, the beam. It's going to go down. It's going to, what normally crushes the olives, it's going to crush David, kill him. Now a miracle was performed for him, and the earth opened beneath him, so he was not crushed by the beam. And that is the meaning of the verse, and that it says, Tarchiv tzadi tachtoiv loimadu karsulai, that you enlarged my steps beneath me, that my feet did not slip, which basically means that you loosened the ground beneath me, allowed me to fall under, so that the beam did not end up crushing me. I guess it got stopped somehow, and I was able to go under, deeper under, that it didn't actually crush me. Now, the Gemara continues over there. So again, we're getting some of the details And the way the commentaries understand this is that this story of our chapter, that Ishbi Benoiv means that this was a matter of punishing David for what happened at Noiv. And this man is going to be the one to do it. So Ishbi Benoiv is the man who's going to punish David about Noiv. And that man we're calling Ishbi Benoiv, which is basically like a nickname, because that's not, it would seem that he probably had another name as well. And this name was just given to him for this job of being that he's the one who is avenging the mistake of the sin of Noiv. Now, so the Gemara continues, gives us more details. Again, it's Avishai who's going to kill him. So the Gemara says that that day at dusk on Shabbos Eve, again, it's right before Shabbos, Avishai is it's before Shabbos, and Avishai ben Tzruya, he shampooed his hair with 4 jugs of water to prepare for Shabbos, and he saw 4 blood stains, and he says, this must be a sign. Or there's another version, there are those who say that a dove came and fluttered its wings before him, which he also understood as a sign. A dove is symbolic of the Jewish people, something is going on. So anyway, this caused Avishai to think. He says, Avishai said, the congregation of Israel is likened to a dove, as it stated, you shall shine the wings as the wings of a dove covered with silver. Conclude from it that maybe David, who's the leader of the Jewish people, must be the king of Israel, is in a state of distress. So he came to David's house. He didn't find him there. And then he said, I better chase after him, but I don't have a horse. So he wondered if he was allowed to use the king's horse. One may not ride on the king's horse. One may not sit on his throne. One may not use his scepter. So in a period of danger, he wondered, maybe I would be allowed to use his horse or his mule. So he came and he asked in the study hall, and they said to him, in a period of danger, yes, you would be allowed to. Of course, the commentaries on the Gemara, they do struggle with what did he think? Of course, it's a matter of life and death, maybe. Of course, you could use his horse. Anyway, and he mounted the king's mule and arose, and he went to the land of the Plishtim, and the land miraculously contracted for him, and he arrived quickly. So again, he had kfitzas haderech, it says. The land, it sort of like folded up, or and made him arrive there sooner. And as he was progressing, he saw Arpa. This is the mother of the giants. This is the woman who David HaMelech's, this is David HaMelech's great-grandmother's sister. So, and as he was progressing, he saw Arpa, and she was spinning the thread with a spindle. When she saw him, she decided, let me kill him. So she removed her spindle, threw it at him, intending to kill him, but of course it didn't work. And she said to Avishai, young man, could you bring me my spindle? So she thought that maybe he didn't realize that she threw it at him to kill him. Maybe it fell there. I don't know what she thought, but she thought she's going to get a favor from him. Anyway, he threw the spindle and struck her at the top of her brain and killed her. So now Arpa was killed by Avishai. Now Avishai, again, what is his goal? He's trying to find David. He thinks he might be in danger. Why? Because he saw some blood, 4 blood stains in his shower, or he saw a dove fluttering its wings, and he somehow got this message, they got this idea that David is in a state of danger, and he's running, and he runs all the way there to area of the Plishtim, and he sees Ishbi B'naiv, and Ishbi B'naiv saw him. It says Kadchazia Yishbi B'naiv. Yishbi B'naiv saw him, and he said, "Uh-oh, now there are two, David and Avishai." So David was right there, and Yishbi B'naiv is nervous. They will kill me. So he threw David up in the air, and he stuck his spear in the ground. He said, "Let David fall upon it and die." Now Avishai recited the name of Hashem and suspended David between heaven and earth so that he would not fall. So somehow he Kabbalistically was able to use God's name. Now, of course, we don't know how to do things like that. We, of course, have to be careful not to do anything like this because we don't know Kabbalah. And this was like a very high level type of thing, of a high level of Kabbalah, to be able to recite God's name and save a person from seemingly death, seemingly falling on a sword, and he was able to suspend him between heaven and earth. So Avishai did this. Avishai recited a sacred name of Hashem, and of course the Gemara asks, why didn't David himself use, if that works, if you could recite Hashem's name, David himself should have done that. And the Gemara answers an interesting answer. It says that a prisoner cannot release himself from a prison, which means that, at least the way Rashi interprets it, that David did not have a clear mind at the time, and he couldn't save himself. And Avishai was able to use Hashem's name. He didn't have a clear mind to say Hashem's name. Now, the Gemara then says, Avishai asked David, "So what are you doing here? Why did you end up in the Plishti territory?" So David said to him, Hashem said to me about, I need to get punished for Noiv, either me or my children, and my descendants, and I chose that I myself. So I ended up here in the enemy territory. So Avishai said to him, "You should pray that your descendants will cease to exist rather than you be handed to the enemy. As it is, a famous saying goes, let your son's son be a poor peddler and sell wax, and you will not suffer." Don't limit your well, they add a term here. It's their own interpretation, it seems like. But don't limit your expenses in order to leave an inheritance for your descendants. But the concept is, worry about yourself, not about your children, and don't do this. So David said to him, "If so, then help me. Let me get out of here, and let me pray to Hashem that it shouldn't affect me, this sin." So he says, "Help me out." And it says, Avishai, the son of Tzeruiah, came to his aid. Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav, he came to his aid in prayer. It means he prayed to Hashem to take away this punishment, that David would end up having a punishment for Noiv, that it shouldn't affect David. And Avishai recited another name of Hashem. He said, Amar Avishai Shem v'achte, and it caused him to go down on earth after being suspended between heaven and earth. And of course, they then fled, and to be continued tomorrow.